What's the Church of Scientology so afraid of?
This is SPTV. Welcome back, everyone, for some more SPTV. Live coverage of the Danny Masterson trial from Los Angeles. The end-of-day update today is stunning. I'm going to have to take my time on this because there are aspects of the testimony we got this afternoon that for a number of reasons are much more difficult for me to listen to and therefore to discuss than all of the other testimony that we've had in this case. So I'm just going to take my time and I'm going to skip over the sections that are most difficult for me just for all of our benefit. So let's see. We went back to court a little early and they called Detective Deborah Myers to the stand. This is not the difficult part. So I was just in such a difficult headspace from the last 2 hours that I forgot the court session started with some stuff that wasn't ridiculously heavy. Okay. So Deborah Myers is a detective who, at the time that Jane Doe 1 first went to the LAPD, she's the first person who realized something was wrong in how Jane Doe 1's complaint was being dealt with by the LAPD. And this is really interesting because, and I realize everyone watching this video isn't going to already have watched like my previous 10 videos on the trial updates. But in yesterday's testimony, we heard from a Detective Schlegel. And at the time that Jane Doe 1 came forward to the LAPD, Detective Schlegel was just a patrol officer. He was working the desk, but now he is a Detective 3 supervisor. And Detective Schlegel had claimed that many things Jane Doe 1 is now saying were not necessarily what she was saying when he first took the report 20 years ago. And the defense team wanted us to believe that because Detective Schlegel was now a Detective 3 supervisor, that he could only have risen to that position because of his extreme competence and dedication and attention to detail. And he could never have possibly left something out of a police report 20 years ago. I mean, for the love of God, he's a police officer, good sir. So what is so funny about the testimony that we heard today from Detective Deborah Myers is that the first thing she noticed when the report crossed her desk is that, geez, it sure seems like this report has to do with a rape. But Officer Schlegel wrote this report as an injury report. That doesn't make any sense. These reports are completely different and are to be handled differently. And so she called Jane Doe 1 on the phone just to go, am I crazy? Like it was like a sanity test for Detective Myers. She called her on the phone to make a quick determination whether this was in fact a report of rape, because if so, the entire thing had to be recategorized and reassigned. Detective Myers determined that yes, this was in fact not a report of an injury. And Detective Myers then scheduled a follow-up in-person interview with Jane Doe 1 to get the actual proper report of what occurred. So I don't know. I was personally quite tickled that Detective 3 supervisor, and now Deborah Myers herself is also a Detective 3 supervisor. So Cohen just got done building up the incredible reputation and competence of Schlegel just for Myers, who is now the exact same, position as Schlegel, to take the stand and be like, yeah, Schlegel totally screwed it up and I had to fix his mess. I was pretty tickled by that. I'm not going to lie. So let me see here. I highlighted some testimony. People's Exhibit number 44 is the full report from Jane Doe 1 about the attack from Danny. We have Addendum C and C1. Okay, yes, that is my handwriting. Is this from June 2004? Yes. What was the reason for the second interview 2 days later that you did with Jane Doe 1? And she said, because the first report was taken as an injury report, which was not appropriate. So I interviewed the victim to see if this was in fact a sexual assault. And this is funny because the testimony was, based on your interview, did you then determine that it was sexual assault? And her answer is, well, yes. And it's funny because on Cohen, was when he was doing the cross-examination, wanted to characterize all this, that Officer Myers at that time was only able to determine that this was in fact not just an injury report, but based on her actual interview with Jane Doe 1. When in reality, what Detective Myers had testified to was that no, merely reading Schlegel's report was enough for her to realize he had miscategorized this thing. It's not like it dawned on her once she started interviewing Jane Doe 1. The only reason she even interviewed Jane Doe 1 to begin with is because once Schlegel's report hit her desk, she could immediately see he had screwed it up. So anyway, that was the testimony on that. Okay, so let's see. The next thing that I've highlighted here, let's figure out why I highlighted this. Okay, so Cohen is crossing Detective Myers, and he goes, so you don't know the accuracy of what Jane Doe 1 said to you? And Detective Myers says, I'm not sure I understand. So you are not making a conclusion that what was put in the police report is accurate. You can only conclude that you're representing that it's what Jane Doe 1 said, not that it's true. She goes, that is correct. So when you speak with Jane Doe 1 on the phone and then you meet with her in person, so you speak with her on the phone, you meet with her in person. Yes, that's correct. So when you meet with her in person, now you're conducting your own interview. Yes, that's correct. And you're making the witness comfortable, and you're giving her as much time as she needs, and you're asking open-ended questions, and you're asking her if there's anything more she wants to tell you, or if there's anything else that you need to know. And you now conduct this investigation with Jane Doe 1, and it sounds like you reached the conclusion that it should be changed to sexual assault. Right. That was the portion of the testimony where Cohen was acting like she was only able to conclude that something was done wrong after a full interview, when in fact that's not what Detective Myers testified to at all. Okay, so let's see. I have another highlighted section here. Oh, yeah, this was interesting. So, one of Cohen's main strategies here is to constantly point out the fact that there are things that Jane Doe have said, details they've divulged in later interviews that don't conflict with earlier interviews, but simply weren't given in earlier interviews. And we're supposed to believe that this means the Jane Does are just liars. So every time he has an officer on the stand, he makes a point of really harping on these points. So did Jane Doe 1 say that, well, I'm fast forwarding to the stuff that matters. Did Jane Doe 1 mention needing to go back to Danny's house to get a pair of keys? Detective Myers says, no, I don't remember that. That was not mentioned. Did Jane Doe 1 say that Danny was pulling or dragging her through the living room toward the jacuzzi? No, that specific detail wasn't mentioned. Did Jane Doe 1 say that Danny picked her up and carried her instead of guiding her? And she goes, well, actually, in my case notes, it does say that he carried her. Now, Detective Myers had explained there's two different types of reports that she was sort of doing simultaneously, and Cohen only seized on the one report where Detective Myers didn't happen to use the word carried. And Myers actually has to correct him. Well, in my other report, it does say carried. And so then he tries to jog her memory by showing her the report where it didn't mention carried. And she goes, I understand you're showing me the report where I didn't mention carried, but I checked my notes in the other report and I did mention carried. So chances are she did say carried, because I wouldn't have just made that word up myself. There were many examples during the proceedings today where I thought to myself, isn't it supposed to be a rule as an attorney you don't ask a question you don't know the answer to? And then I started to wonder, I wonder if that rule or that guiding principle applies to defense attorneys, or do defense attorneys sometimes have to ask questions they don't know the answers to because they haven't had a chance to interview these witnesses themselves? And then I thought to myself, no, I really think defense attorneys strategically are only still, to be safe, only supposed to ask questions you don't know the answer to. There are so many times Cohen asked questions and was surprised by the answer. Okay, so let me see here. Look, fast forwarding to only. Here's another example where even Myers, I did feel that procedurally speaking, Cohen was perhaps scoring some points with the jury because there were so many examples, whether they're real or not, of questions where he goes, did Jane Doe say this to you in the interview? There were so many examples where Detective Meyer said, no, she didn't say that. And these are items that have been pertinent to the testimony. And I don't want to go through them all, but, there was maybe 5 or 6 or 7 little things where Cohen goes, specific things, where Cohen goes, did Jane Doe once say this to you? And she said no. But there's one example where it backfired. And that's Cohen said to Detective Myers, did Jane Doe 1 in her interview with you and in her follow-up interview with you ever mention that the reason she needed to go back to Danny's house that night was because she needed to get a set of keys that she had to have? And Detective Myers said, no, that was never mentioned. However, Myers had already testified earlier in her own testimony that day, today, that she had received a report, a copy of a report that Jane Doe 1 had written for the Scientology authorities, and that a copy of this report had been provided to Detective Myers, and that Detective Myers did read that report. And in that report, this came up on redirect. In that report, it very specifically mentions this issue of the keys, and that Jane Doe 1 had to go back to Danny's place to meet up with someone who was going to give her these keys. So Myers' testimony was an interesting mix of things that were positive for the prosecution, combined with a mix of things that, depending on the perspective of the jurors and how closely the jurors are paying attention, might have been positive for the defense. But then there was also this aspect of almost impeaching her own testimony a bit. And I think this just speaks to the general fallibility of memory itself, whether you're a victim or whether you're a witness or whether you're a police officer. And hopefully, it's my hope that the jurors are going to will just factor all of that into the equation. You cannot there's only so much weight you can put on the minutia of someone's memory. Your memory can change over time. Now, Philip Cohen would like us to believe that if the victims' memories of the minutia change over time, then I guess they're mistaken about having been raped. Not guilty. I don't think the jurors are going to go that way. Okay, let's see. What is the next thing I have highlighted here? Oh, that's the carried thing that I just mentioned. That's fine. Okay. This is where I'm going to have to take it slow. So Kathleen, we're just going to call her Kathleen J, because that's how she's identified herself in court. Kathleen J is the woman who was raped by Danny Masterson in 2000 at a wrap party for a movie in Toronto, Canada. I will not go through the details of her testimony. It was powerful. I'm pretty sure I saw the judge wiping away tears. I know I was. It was devastating testimony. And yeah. The only time Kathleen herself actually even got emotional was when she had to look at Danny to identify him in the courtroom. And to explain that, so not that it requires explanation, but it occurs to me that it might help frame it a little bit, that she did say she's been seeing a therapist on this subject and discussing it a lot for, I might have misheard her, or I thought she said since basically 2001. I could have that wrong. I mean, it wouldn't matter whether it's been 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, or 20 years that she's been seeing a therapist. It might explain why talking about the incident itself is something she has done many times and is not super difficult for her to do right now. But she hasn't seen Danny Masterson since the year 2000. Okay, let's see. There's some highlighted stuff here that I want to get into. Okay, I've got this highlighted. Let's just see why I've got it highlighted. So Cohen goes, you've given a fairly, this is on cross-examination. You've given a fairly detailed description of your claim of rape. Objection argumentative. Sustained. Did you tell Tony Ortega that you remembered it was Danny Masterson who was chatting you up and offered you a drink, and the next thing you remember was waking up in a hotel room in terrible pain? And Kathleen says, nope, I did not say that. And Cohen says, are you sure? And she says, yes. And he goes, did you review the article that Tony Ortega wrote about the conversation you had with him about this attack? And she goes, yes. He goes, well, did you ever contact Tony Ortega to tell him that he had misstated your words or misquoted you or misrepresented you? Now, Kathleen must have misunderstood the question, because in her answer, she said, yes, I contacted Tony and I asked him if he could remove the article because I did not want my coworkers to see it. Now, that's different than what Cohen asked. So Cohen said, well, that's different than my question. Did you tell Tony he had gotten the facts wrong? And she goes, well, I don't recall. Okay. We're going to touch on this a little more later, but it became evident at this point in the testimony that the article Tony Ortega published about his phone conversation with Kathleen that he had with her about the attack was published without her consent and without her permission, and that the phone call occurred without Kathleen understanding what the consequences would be of the phone call. This was revisited later in the testimony, which we're going to get to shortly. Here's the next part of the testimony that I highlighted. When you left the hotel, did you know that when you left, by the time you left the hotel, did you know that you had been raped by Danny Masterson? And she said, well, I didn't leave the hotel that night. And there was some back and forth between her and Cohen. She's like, yeah, but by the time you left the hotel, did you know that you'd been raped by Danny Masterson? And she goes, well, yes, but I did not know his last name and I did not know who he was. And he goes, okay, I'm not going to bury the lead here. Cohen is about to engage in a line of questioning that basically says, if this really happened to you, and you knew this happened to you at a Dracula 2000 rap party, how in the world would you ever have actually watched this movie if you already had this horrible association with this movie? Now, I already knew the answer to this as he was going through this line of questioning. I couldn't believe he was going down this line of questioning, but let me show you how this plays out. Okay, so you knew that you were raped at a Dracula 2000 party. Yes. And you would have wanted to avoid anything to remind you of what occurred there. She said, sure. And so did you ask for a copy of this movie? I skipped a couple questions. She explained that she didn't go and seek out the movie. A friend had sent her a pirated copy. And he goes, so you asked your friend for a copy of this movie? She goes, no. And he goes, oh, so you were sent a copy of this movie? And she goes, yes. And he goes, and you didn't immediately burn it or throw it in the trash? It was a ridiculously argumentative question. But she said, no. And he goes, you watched the movie? She said, yes. Remember, guys, she didn't know, one, who Danny Masterson was. She didn't know he was an actor in the movie. All she knew was that she went to a rap party for a different movie. She was then invited to an after party for Dracula 2000, and she happened to meet this guy named Danny who raped her. So it's not like the association with Dracula 2000 and her rape was like concrete. Okay. Anyhow. And she goes, in fact, you told the police, of course we watched the movie. And Kathleen said, yes. He goes, even though you associated Dracula 2000 with the rape. And she goes, yes. And he goes, and you said the reason that you watched the movie was because it was shot in Toronto. And by the way, she lives in Toronto. And she goes, yes. And he goes, why did you watch Dracula 2000? And she said, because I didn't understand I would have that reaction while watching the movie. Now, on redirect, it was clarified that she had no idea Danny Masterson was even in the movie. She didn't even know who Danny Masterson was. She didn't even know that Danny's last name was Masterson. This is a perfect example of Cohen asking questions that he doesn't seem to know what the answer is going to be, because this is a whole line of questioning that gets thrown right out the window as soon as it becomes evident that she didn't know Danny was in the damn movie. Okay, so anyhow, that was that. Okay, here's the next part that I have highlighted. You said that you said on direct examination that someone at the wrap party you were at, guys, I failed to explain. Kathleen worked back in the time that this all occurred as like an assistant props supervisor, and she worked on a movie called Angel Eyes that was filming in Canada, starring Jennifer Lopez. That the night in question, she had gone to a wrap party for the movie she was working on. There was another wrap party occurring for Dracula 2000 that was happening in the same hotel. That's why you've got, some reference to two different things going on. Okay. So you said that on direct examination, someone asked your husband, because she was at this party with her husband. Someone asked your husband if he wanted to go to this other party. And she goes, yes. And you were with your husband, and you were also with your two stepdaughters. And she goes, well, my stepdaughters weren't there at the time that we were asked if we wanted to go to this other party. And then I'm skipping forward a little bit. And he goes, do you recall who invited your husband to go to the other wrap party? And she said, no, I don't recall. He goes, didn't you tell Tony Ortega that it was in fact Gerard Butler who invited you up to his suite for the after party? And she goes, no, absolutely not. I never said that. I highlighted that point because it is now we're getting into other territory. It's one thing to publish an article about a conversation that was had, I'm going to say, in confidence. If you don't know that the conversation you're having is going to be made public, then I would say the conversation was had in confidence. It's one thing to publish a conversation that you had in confidence. It's another thing to either misquote or misstate what was said, knowing that this person could be a witness testifying in a criminal trial. Now, to be fair, somebody could say, well, maybe Tony got it right and it's the witness who got it wrong. That argument can be made, and I don't know which one is the right answer. But now we're into a second level of problems. Just the first level being publishing something without consent, and the second level being now there's a conflict between the witness who's testifying on the stand in a criminal trial and the journalist who published an article about this witness's experience without consent and who happens to be sitting right there in the courtroom. This is going to become a big deal in a few minutes. Okay. So let's see. There's something else that I highlighted here. We're going to skip that. Okay. There's another example where Cohen is, I don't want to get into all the details just because I think it might be unnecessarily time consuming. Cohen is again continuing cross-examination with Kathleen, questioning her about details where her testimony is conflicting with what has already been reported by Tony Ortega. And again, for those of you who've been following the coverage of this case, we've covered over and over and over again how statements, particularly by victims of sexual assault, can evolve over time, not in a way that is necessarily contradictory, but in a way that changes. Details are recovered. Points where in the beginning someone's only speculating as to possibilities, those memories become more clear, and then you have a clear answer, whereas before maybe you were speculating as to a number of answers. All of these things are, of course, coming into play in this phone conversation that Kathleen had with Tony Ortega only like 6 months ago. And these details are being published. And because they're being published and put out into the press, now Kathleen is having to answer up for any inconsistencies. And how does Kathleen know if these are actual changes to what she's saying, or if Tony's just getting it wrong? Who knows? I don't know. Okay, so let's see. And I know I haven't, and the details here have to do with who offered who a beer, or does she remember being guided somewhere, or did she black out at this point and have no memories at all until this point, and all this kind of stuff. It got a little messy, so I just don't want to go through all those steps. Okay, let's see here. Okay. I will take this moment to address something that's come up. And I try to stay away from the drama as much as possible, but it's reared its head in this trial, and I'm going to comment on it. People many times ask me, you seem to have a beef with Tony Ortega. What's the deal? My beef with Tony Ortega runs long and it runs deep. But part of the many things I could point to have to do with exactly what Kathleen is saying occurred. A private conversation occurred because the person had no idea they were talking to someone who's going to publish this information. And Tony Ortega has done that to so many people who are close and important to me. I'm not going to name the people, because in the past when I have, they've said, look, I don't need the headache. Please don't mention my name. I don't need the harassment. I don't need Tony asking me to come and now, like, comment on it. So Kathleen said there was a point in the trial where this was on redirect, where she was asked, did the article that was published have anything to do with your decision to go to the police? And she said yes. And she was asked, well, why? And she said, well, I asked Tony to take the article down and he wouldn't. So I figured, what else do I have to lose at this point? The information is already out there. And so I figured if the information's already out there, I might as well go to the police. And I can promise you that Tony Ortega is going to frame this as a victory for justice. Look what I did. Look, what I did was great because it gave Kathleen the courage to go to the police. That's not what occurred at all. Kathleen was exploited and her trust was abused. And when she asked for her privacy to be respected, that request was denied. And so then she decided to go to the police. I can tell you that I'm sure Tony's argument would be, hey, I'm a journalist. I got the scoop. Yep, you are a journalist. You did get the scoop. But in so many of these cases, this person never would have even spoken to you if they thought you were just a journalist getting the scoop. So many people in my community of former Scientologists have confided in Tony in confidence because they don't think he's just a journalist. They think he's Leah Remini's BFF, which he's not. They think he's Mike Rinder's BFF, which he's not. They think he's a trusted member of the community, which he's not. He's a journalist who's out for the scoop and to make a name for himself. And for a very long time, if somebody wanted information public, Tony Ortega was pretty much the only one you could go to. He was the only one who had a platform who would write anything about Scientology, and that had value. It has value. But so many people in my community that I care about have been exploited and abused by this process and then basically told, you were wonderful. Everybody loved it. This is one of the benefits of the phenomenon of SPTV. Okay. There is no longer a need for someone who's never been a Scientologist, someone who pretends to care about the community as long as it serves them. There's no longer a need for that person to be the conduit, the confidant, the person to go to if somebody wants to talk about something. And to be clear, many of these people whose confidence was used and abused, they weren't talking to Tony because he was a journalist. They were talking to him because they thought he was a friend. And then he does the one day and goes, I'm just a journalist. I've got the scoop. Well, the people who run SPTV channels don't care about the scoop. They don't care about being the first one to report something. You'll notice I'll do stories about, I'll do videos about subjects that have already been discussed on other videos about other reports. No one cares about getting the scoop on SPTV. We care about sharing the truth about Scientology, telling people's stories. You would never see someone on SPTV publishing something out of confidence. By the way, this is what happened with Lisa Marie Presley. Okay. Tony Ortega did not get an interview with Lisa Marie Presley. Tony Ortega had a private phone call with Lisa Marie Presley that he secretly recorded. Okay. He did not have an interview that he kept confident, that he kept hidden for 8 years. And I know this because I speak from firsthand knowledge of this. Tony Ortega did not have an interview with Lisa Marie Presley before she died. Anything Lisa Marie Presley told to Tony Ortega, she told in the confidence of a private phone call that she did not know was being secretly recorded. Then when Lisa Marie Presley died, Tony started calling this thing an interview and was going to publish it in Rolling Stone. And then they didn't publish it, to my understanding, because they found out this was not an interview. It was a secretly recorded private phone call. Tony Ortega records all the private phone calls that he has with former Scientologists. And if he ever gets the inkling that you might be talking to someone else or you might be giving the real scoop to a real journalist, he's going to publish your information without your consent. It has happened time and time and time again. Okay. So, someone might say, hey, look, he's on our side. Stop talking shit. Guys, I care more about the members of my close-knit community than I care about a so-called journalist who's only out to get the scoop and make a name for himself. It's why I'm here at this trial. Okay. So anyway, I won't be any more long-winded about that as I need to be. My goal is not drama. This is not drama that I'm talking about. This is abuse. And I have a position to be able to say something about it. And I have a position to be able to let anyone on their way out of Scientology know. And this is why every single person the Aftermath Foundation helps to leave Scientology gets a piece of advice from me. And that advice is, don't talk to Tony Ortega. And the reason I tell them that has now become evident in the fucking Danny Masterson criminal trial, where one of the victims of Danny Masterson has revealed that Tony Ortega published her entire story without her consent and without her permission. And Tony's going to act like he did everyone a public service because then she went to the police. That's Tony Ortega. Okay, guys. And that's my update. So let's go to the chat. All right, guys, I'm scrolling up and up and up. Who's in there starring comments? Oh, some helpful little elf is in there starring comments for me. And thank you so much, because you've just saved me an awful lot of work. Suzanne Oliver with a super sticker. Thank you, Suzanne. Valerie Boljak with a super sticker. Thank you, Valerie Boljak. Michelle Macklemore. Thank you, Michelle. Katie Moritz. Thank you, Kate Moritz. Marcy Nalon, thank you for taking time away from your family to do this. Does Scientology cover up all crimes, i.e., murder, robbery, domestic violence? Hi, Osa. Scientology will, murders, that's a tough one. It's hard to cover up murder. I don't know of an instance of murder being covered up. Believe me, they would cover it up if they could. It's just almost impossible to do. Everything, what did I just do? Everything else, Scientologist on Scientologist crime, Scientology will cover up. If it doesn't involve a Scientologist, Scientology will be happy to cooperate with police. In fact, it's one of the ways Scientology gets in good with the police. They will help the police solve any crimes that occur anywhere their cameras can detect it, just not if the crime involved a Scientologist. Dynamic Boston. Thanks for your passion and caring. Well, thank you very much. Terry Perry Lux. Hey, Aaron, thanks for all the hard work. I watch all your videos and I really admire all the work you and the others do. Always watch Mondays. Love me some SPTV. Love y'all. Thank you, Terry Perry Lux. I really appreciate it. Red tar for me. Hugs for you from Melba, Idaho. Sorry for all the trauma you're experiencing too. It's not me, guys. I mean, it's just hard to listen to some of this stuff. It's not me being traumatized. I mean, I don't think hearing difficult stuff, I don't call that trauma. It's not me. It's the women who are having to tell these stories. But yeah. Anyway, thank you, Red Tar. Susan Oliver. I bet Homer really regrets putting Detective Myers on the stand. Way to go, Deb. Yeah, I bet you're right. Okay. Chuco. Greetings from beautiful Bug Tussle, Oklahoma. My heart breaks for the victims. It's a shame that Danny Masterson is overshadowed by Scientology shenanigans. The world sees Scientology as a punchline instead of a religion. Absolutely. Okie dokie. Calico26. I watched Tony's video from yesterday and he brought up Danny's first attorney, Tom Mesereau. I think it is highly likely it was Tom who gave the discovery to Vicky Podboreski. Remember, it was Vicky who told Tom that going to the cops wasn't in the ethics book. Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, Lauren Taylor. You're all heart, Aaron. All heart. Well, thank you very much. David Owens, thanks for respecting the Jane Does and being sensitive. Thank you very much, Dave. Nikita Wadman. Did Danny Masterson have any reaction to Kathleen's testimony? I wasn't watching Danny. I did look over a few times, and I would say, fair to say, probably no reaction. I mean, he didn't look good, but I wouldn't say, I would say he did not show any particular reaction. And his fucking mother is there listening to all this. Like, why is she there? Does she think like I couldn't even bring myself to be there? His sister's there, his brother. I don't understand it. Percy Kersey. AA run. PC, the never in SP here. I love it. As always, you're so valuable. I appreciate you very much. Question: what is the Aftermath Foundation's preferred method of handing out cards? Keep up the good work. Percy Kersey, I'm not sure what you mean. If you send a request to the Aftermath Foundation's Facebook page or Instagram page, or if you email volunteer@theaftermathfoundation.org and you tell them you want some cards and you give them your info, they will send you cards. I think the best way to put those cards to use is if you're on Scientology's mailing list and you get business return envelopes. Put those cards in the business return envelopes and send them back in. And that is a way to, using Scientology's own money, inform staff members and Sea Org members about the Aftermath Foundation. Otherwise, the best thing to do with the cards is to leave them around orgs, or in the window of an org, or in the door of an org, or places that the staff members go to. Phone polls around orgs, if that's legal, I don't know, but I hope that answers the question. Guys, I hope you don't mind. I'm not going to put up super chats that specifically have to do with Tony. I've said what I've said. I don't want to make more of it. I mean, I've already made a lot of it, so I'm not going to be like, I don't want to make a thing of it. I've made a thing of it. I just want to limit the thing that I've made to the thing that I've already made and leave it at that, if you don't mind. I don't want you to think I'm ignoring you guys. MW. Well, MW, you're asking me about a question that I obviously can't answer. What made KG's testimony that much more powerful than the Jane Doe's? Reading the testimony on Tony Ortega's blog, it seems comparable. I can understand that you would feel that way. My opinion is that it affects me differently, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Okay, Scarlet Begonias. Off topic, hi to the other Scarlet Begonias. There's more than one of you, Scarlet. Incredible. Bernice Dooley. Great job, AA Run. Watched Nora interview on the Edge channel with Andrew. Oh, good. Was she on today? She was brilliant. SPTV. Oh, that's fantastic. So my friend Nora Ames, sounds like she did an interview with Andrew Gold. I can't wait to watch it. That'll give me something to watch tonight. Thank you, Bernice. Gina D. Your integrity in all of this is clear. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, well, this is simple enough. Has there been any awkwardness between you and Tony over these weeks since you're sitting in the same row in the courtroom? No awkwardness. I pretend he's not there and he pretends I'm not there. It's been perfectly civil. Okay. Yes, I see that. Matrix Tech Solutions. Thank you for the super sticker. Kathy Ann, thank you for speaking out against using and victimizing women and victims in any way. Have a drink and take a rest. Thank you, Kathy Ann. I'll be doing that. Declared Dave loves suppressive Sherry. Hang in there, Aaron. You're doing good work. Well, thank you, Declared Dave. I'm definitely hanging in there. Look, the testimony was hard to listen to today, but, being in court is not hard. Being out here is not hard. It's a little pricey, but it's not hard. And I'm enjoying the work. It is not a chore. There are just days where the testimony is difficult. Could be worse. Kathy B. Will Danny Masterson testify? No, he will not. Susie Q. Aaron, you're freaking awesome. Much love. Well, thank you. Oh, Susie Q. Gunsmoke Blackfinger. Showing care for the source of information is what separates a journalist from a tabloid writer. I think that's a great point. Tarkina Meyer, thank you for your candid comments. I've seen through the first trial coverage versus this one, the very different perspective you bring, and appreciate you very much. Thank you, Tarkina Meyer. I appreciate it. I'm going to skip the next one. And the next one. Okay. Cherry Lime Aid. Sorry, guys. All right. Cherry Limeade. Never. Hold on. All right. Never been a fan of Danny or his shows, but so far I'm extremely impressed with his work in that Downfall of Scientology show. I've never enjoyed watching a raging dumpster fire quite so much. Thank you, AA Ron. Thank you very much. Okay, skipping the next one. Skipping the next one. Darlene, if you're short on travel fees, let us know. Well, guys, I mean, the donations for the cover the travel expenses have been very generous. And I mean, look, since you're mentioning it, I will take the opportunity to just to promote it. Although, look, it's not necessary. I know some people want to do it. I've been telling people if the reason you're doing particular super chats is to help with travel expenses, YouTube takes 30% of that money, so you might as well just send it direct. Honestly, guys, almost all the travel expenses have already been covered. It's not a thing. But for those who want, this is the way to do. I appreciate everyone who's helped, and the help has been significant. It's been very, very meaningful and important to me. So thank you very much. Let's see, Natalie Scott. Thank you for all you're doing. Hugs to you. Well, thank you very much. Panko, I wonder if the defendant and family view themselves as the victims. Panko, I think you might have hit the nail on the head right there. Brady Barton, first chat. You're doing a wonderful job. Thank you, Brady. Ken's channel. The news of this trial would be much different without you. Thanks to your family. Do you think Kathleen's husband will still testify? I think so. I think he testifies tomorrow. And based on everything that we saw and heard this afternoon, it does appear that the prosecution will be resting its case tomorrow, early tomorrow. Kathleen's testimony did not take a very long time. Her cross-examination took a lot of time. Let me see, guys. See, I don't bear with me, guys. I'm trying to mind. I don't want to assume. Okay, I'm distracted by the chat. I'm trying not to be distracted. The prosecution is resting its case tomorrow, early, and I believe that is even with calling Kathleen's husband. Actually, Kathleen did finish her cross-examination and redirect and recross. There is an issue that she might be called back tomorrow for. Oh, actually, and this gets to the Tony Ortega stuff. When the judge was asking the prosecution and the defense to give her a bit of a heads up on scheduling, Philip Cohen walked to the back of the courtroom and spoke directly to Tony Ortega in front of everyone and said, "So are you okay with being recalled to testify tomorrow?" And Tony was like, "Well, I'll be here tomorrow, but I haven't responded to any subpoenas." And Cohen was like, "Oh yeah, we can do a subpoena if we need." And Tony was like, and Philip was like, "Oh, okay, we'll go that route if we have to." And then, so it's very clear that Philip Cohen is now going to have Tony Ortega. Now, maybe Tony has exemption because he's a journalist, perhaps, but he is now going to potentially have Tony Ortega on the stand testifying against Kathleen, the victim in the Danny Masterson case. And because Kathleen has said that Tony has misreported what she said. Imagine if Tony Ortega has to take the stand and say, Kathleen is lying, or Kathleen has misremembered. God forbid Tony Ortega has to admit, the way I know that Kathleen is misremembering her conversation with me is because I have an audio recording of the call and I stand by my reporting. Well, maybe Tony Ortega, you shouldn't have attempted to interview without disclosure that it was an interview. The victim in a criminal trial, one of the victims of the defendant in a criminal trial, and then publish the article without her consent, and then put yourself now in a position of having to testify against the victim who's testifying against Danny Masterson. What a tangled web we weave when we choose to deceive. Yeah. What a fucking shit show, huh? Okay. So, but Tony did a public service, because if it weren't for Tony, Kathleen wouldn't have gone to the police, you guys. Okay, let's see. Let me see if I got anything else. Let me see if I got anything else. Rachel Mills, it's been great seeing you at the trial. Great to see you too, Rachel. Kat and Maggie, part of your next trip to Kohl's. I'm just bossy that way. Thanks for putting your life on hold for this. Thank you. Swashline, Danny should have hired Tampa Brad to replace Philip Cohen. His case is a disaster. Interesting take. Let's see. Spin Gal 18. It's Deanna from Pembroke, Ontario, Canada. Thank you for your passionate and honest updates. We all appreciate it. And also, it sounds like you need a cookie. Yeah, the blood sugar might be a little low. I'm gonna skip these comments. I'm not gonna. There are comments I'm skipping that don't have to do with Tony. There's comments I'm skipping that just we want the video to go smoothly, you guys. Let's get through this. Lulu92, as an SA survivor, thank you for being so tactful in your coverage of the JDs. Well, thank you very much. Dawn Marie Scora, longtime watcher, first time caller. Respect Re Ortega speech. Love what you do and how you do it. Integrity always trumps BS and betrayal. Thank you very much. Mary R. Do you think the former Scientologists who testified hold up well under cross-examination because of their bull bait training? I actually hadn't thought about that very much. You know, I should say that when you're doing Scientology communication drills that involve bull baiting, the way you're supposed to respond to bull bait is to completely ignore it. That is not how you have to respond to being cross-examined. You have to directly address the bull bait that's being thrown at you. So I would argue that any experience with bull baiting is probably not what allows the Jane Does to hold up well under cross-examination. But an interesting thought. Thank you for the super chat. Paula Puffer, hats off to you and your integrity. I appreciate that. Clearly you have the Jane Does and the victim's best interests at heart. Thank you, Paula Puffer. I appreciate that. Mystic Wolf, regarding your last video about Cohen being surprised by how the detective testified, is it possible he thought the detective would change testimony after the email was sent to the LAPD? Thank you for the coverage. Love SPTV. Mystic Wolf, I think that is possible. I hesitate to put too much weight on the causes for things, but it did occur to me that might have factored into it. In fact, you could ask, might that have factored into how the detective testified? Maybe. Inigo Montoya, forgive me for skipping that one. It's a little close to home for me. Susan Oliver, slime begets slime. Tarkina Meyer, if California is a two-party consent state for recording and she did not consent to recording, need to talk to your attorney friend Zach about if they could force it to be played. Tarkina Meyer, Tony Ortega lives in New York, which is a one-party consent state, and the law that applies is the law where the person who's doing the recording is in, and that's how Tony gets away with that. Okay, Heather Carr, if Scientology is put in a corner, do you think that they would do something stupid? That is, would you be afraid for your life as put one of you guys on death threat? Nah, no concern about that whatsoever, Heather. Garrett W, thank you for the super sticker. Fidoville, thank you for the super sticker. Let's see, what does it say here? Ortega would have to take the fifth if recorded in California. California, two-party consent consent to tape a conversation, it would be wiretapping laws. There's no question that Tony was in New York when he recorded it, or at least would claim that he was, and the defense would have no way of proving otherwise. And also the defense doesn't care about that. Like, the defense doesn't care whether Tony was allowed to or not allowed to record the conversation, or even if he did or did not record it. They're just going to make him, testify, or try to. Me Time DIY, love you. Thank you very much. What does this say? Kathy O'Toole, is Kathleen one who said her step? Yes. Yeah, that is part of what made it so hard. Okay, R. Hester. For a laugh, when I listen to Monday Night SPTV, my son will hear Mark and say, is that the guy who always interrupts his wife? I hope Mark and Claire are watching. They're going to get a kick out of that one. All right, everybody. It's been almost an hour now. I believe that's all the super chats. I hope I'm not missing any. If I am, guys, I apologize. But let's call it a night. That's all for me. Thank you to everyone for watching. Thank you for all your support as well, guys. Really, it means a lot to me. Thank you, everyone who watches until the very end, and I'll talk to you all soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here.